What's wrong is using government, using your neighbor's money, using regulation to force your ideas upon other people. The American people is a very benevolent people, and the less we have to pay in taxes and the less subject we are to regulation, the more benevolent we are. You can go back again. There is a myth in this country that people didn't know how to read and write before public education. But the American people, before public education got off the ground, they were very concerned about teaching their kids to read and write. And you had the one-house school movement going on. And there are studies that have shown that Americans were probably more literate back in the 19th century than what they are today.
Has right and left ever been more polarized than it is right now? Maybe we're thinking the wrong way. Maybe we should think about right and wrong, not right and left. Anders Ingemarson, how'd I do?
You did pretty well.
Pretty well.
Yeah.
We've talked before, but your book, which is Think Right or Left, not Left and Right. How's that? No, think right or wrong, not left and right.
You got it.
There we go. Help me. What's the main thesis?
So the main thesis of the book is that the traditional political spectrum, where we have left to right, it's kind of outdated. You have probably heard about the horseshoe theory, where people talk about the center, and then the two sides, they start to diverge. But then when they get extreme, like on the left, we have communism, on the right, we have fascism, they seem to start to look like one another again, and they kind of come together at the bottom of the horseshoe. But I'm saying that, no, that's not sufficient. Instead, we should think about this in terms of morality, in terms of what is morally right and morally wrong, because that clarifies things a lot more.
Are you saying that people who don't agree with you morally are wrong?
Mistaken or wrong, yes.
All right.
A lot of people out there are mistaken.
What's the difference between, by the way, morals and politics?
So morals are more fundamentals. Morals are actually what pretty much give rise to politics on a societal level. So morality is about what do you think is good, what do you think is bad, what is right, what is wrong. And depending on what kind of morality you have, that will very often, if in not most cases, dictate what kind of politics you're supporting in order to shape society to what you would like it to be.
Is there a difference, just to make sure our words are understood, is there a difference between morality and principles?
Well, there are principles of morality, but principles is more foundational, more fundamental.
I guess what I think about that is America used to have, we still have, great political divides, big arguments over big stuff and little stuff. Mm-hmm. But the way we come to those decisions, the way we argue about those decisions, in my mind and in my grade school civics class, was always based on some principles. The principles that you have the free speech to disagree with me. The principles that we vote on these things. The principles that some things require much more than just a simple vote. If you're going to take away someone's right to religion or put them into slavery, no, we've got a document that says we agree on these basic principles. Mm-hmm. And there seemed to be a system where we could fight over political issues in a principled way. I used to hear things like, I don't agree with you, but I will fight to my death to protect your right to say it. Mm-hmm. Or that the ends don't justify the means. I don't hear those things that often anymore. So I understand we'll get into the morals, but I worry that America has lost the principles by which to disagree on things.
Yeah, I think we have lost sight of a lot of those principles. So if you go back to the founding of our country,
wait a minute, which country are we talking about?
We're talking about the United States of America.
You talk funny, so I don't know which country you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I'm from Sweden, but there's a reason why I'm an American by choice. And so if we're going back to the founding, or even before the founding, to the Declaration of Independence back in 1776, one of the principles of the Declaration was our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And another term for that is our individual rights, our rights as individuals. And the individual was or is supreme versus society. And so that was our founders, what they tried to. They tried to liberate us from the age-old collectivism or groupism of the old world of Europe.
Was it groupism, or was it simply the monarchy? Somebody could easily say, yeah, that's great on the Declaration of Independence, but we have a constitution to, quote, promote the general welfare. And therefore they say, you know what we need is a less individualistic system to promote the general welfare.
Well, I think you're really pointing out a very important thing, where I think when we came to the Constitution, our founders were unfortunately not principled enough to either define what they meant with the general welfare, or they were perhaps, I wouldn't say naive, but the culture back then, I think their concept of the general welfare was a lot more limited than what it has expanded to be now in the 21st century, when basically society, based on how we have voted over the last 100, 150 years, has started to infringe more and more on those individual rights that they laid out in the Declaration.
Made it clear that is the natural state of affairs, that liberty wanes and tyranny grows. Even they understood that society always moves towards a more tyrannical system or a more controlling system if we are not very vigilant. That eternal vigilance is our key.
If we are not very vigilant. And being very vigilant means or demands that you understand and appreciate those fundamental principles that the country were founded on.
All right, I tell you what, let's try to get it out from 250 years ago and bring it to today. Give me a couple examples of where people think about left and right when they should be thinking about right and wrong.
Sure.
Do you have something today that I can wrap my hands around?
Yeah, we can take, let's take education, where we have had, and this goes actually back to the Constitution, that education was something that our founders again thought would be in the public, a public responsibility, and we got public schools 100 years later and so on and so forth. But if you look at it today, you could say that even though the right, political right, are more inclined to support private alternatives, school choice, vouchers, you name it, while the left, political left, are more entrenched in the belief that the government should have the primary responsibility for our children's education. When push comes to shove, very few of those people on the political right are willing to question the fundamental premise of public education. While I'm saying that your individual rights to protect and respect them fully requires that you have the right to decide how your children should be educated. And that in the extension of that politically is a separation of state and education.
Well, we have a separation of church and state.
Yes, we do.
And for the most part, all sides agree of why that's good.
Yes.
But we have some who say, no, we're a Christian nation, and therefore we should be pushing Christian values. But, for the most part...
Overall, I agree with you.
But what I'm hearing, if I were a public school teacher and I'm listening to you, I'd be saying, oh, this guy is saying, not left and right, but he's saying what I'm doing is wrong. And that my view of government education is morally wrong. Is that what you're saying?
Well, fundamentally, yes. But we have to make a distinction here between the system as such and many of the people in the system. This country is full of dedicated, passionate, public school teachers who are trying to do their best. And there are obviously good public schools.
So are you calling them useful idiots?
I wouldn't use that word for it because I don't think they're idiots. I think they're even useful in
if
some
I'm
places.
reading you correctly,
Yeah.
I think you're calling the government-run education system wrong.
Yes, I am.
And so what they are doing is they are spending their careers doing something wrong.
I think they're spending their careers fighting a system in many cases that unfortunately cannot be sustainably reformed and shouldn't be sustainably reformed. It should be abandoned, it should be phased out over time because it is, as a system, morally wrong.
Why is it morally wrong?
Because it removes the right from parents to decide how to educate their children. So today, for instance, yes, you can put your children in private school. You can, if you're lucky, get into a charter school. But the system is biased against that because as a parent, whether you like the current school system or not, you have to pay your property taxes if you own a house. If you rent, you're still indirectly paying property taxes. And a big portion of those property taxes goes toward the public school system. So the public school system has a financial advantage and it also has a regulatory advantage. Lots of regulations that impede parents from doing this.
I think I get that, but let me keep challenging you on this. There are people out there who said, wait a second, that parents have a right to school choice. And I would imagine many of them go, yeah, they've got a right to reach into their own pocket and send them to some fancy pants private school. And now I think we've gotten to the point where people recognize a right to homeschooling as an alternative.
Good example, yeah.
But are you saying that parents have a right to have the money that's been taken from them in property taxes mostly, and also income taxes, and that they should get the money themselves instead of it going to the school? In other words, should that public money follow the kid?
Absolutely.
Then this is the challenge. Isn't that a value judgment? Is it moral? Aren't you just saying that those people who disagree with you are morally wrong?
Yes, if they understand the context and still insist on their model, then I would argue that they are morally wrong. But again, as I said, the vast majority of Americans are simply, they may not have thought too much about it, and a lot of people think that they can change the current system from within, which I argue is unfortunately long-term not possible.
Why not?
Because of the fact that it is so entrenched in different special interests. And as long as your fellow man has a right to weigh in, because given that it is public, we have, as individuals, a right to weigh in, and it becomes almost a battlefield of conflicting ideas.
In my time in public policy, I have seen things open up inside government schools. When you say you can't reform, I would have to come back and go, well, wait a minute. We now have open enrollment where you can send your kid to a different public school. We have charter schools. We have magnet schools. We've got different schools for different folks inside the governmental system. And we have all sorts of different choices inside. Do you not see that as steps in the right direction?
It can very well be steps in the right direction.
But you said it could not be fixed.
But yes, because fundamentally, ultimately, the end point is that given the fact that you as a parent are forced to participate with your tax dollars and with the fact that it limits your choice, means that it is, in my view, immoral.
All right, let me go a little further. Then is education a governmental function? If you look at the Constitution, we've got several things that the Constitution says, and I believe there are core functions of government. I think government is there to run courts. I think governments are there for public safety. I'll go so far as to say governments need to build roads. These are core governmental functions. Are you saying that education is not among them?
That is correct. And to add to that, I would disagree with you on the roads as well, but that can be a separate discussion. So when it comes to schools, so let me say it this way. So we have a declaration, which is kind of the mission statement of the country. And then our framers, they put that into a constitution. They did a really, really good job for what they did at the time. But they also knew that it wasn't perfect. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put in a Bill of Rights and an amendment process. And to your point, I'm saying that yes, the fact that they put in some ideas about education in the Constitution, that was a mistake. And that should at some point, and we're talking about the shining city on a hill, and who knows when that will be, but there will be an amendment.
Do you consider yourself an anarchist?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a radical for capitalism, and capitalism in this sense is a social system, not just the economics of capitalism. It's a system, and back to your points of what the government really should do, and according to a capitalist view, it defends us against foreign aggressors, so that's a military. It has the law enforcement system, and it has a judiciary to mete out justice and such. But those are the three functions of government.
I've heard people describe themselves as anarcho-capitalists, which means they're anarchists that believe in capitalism and believe that most things will be solved through spontaneous order in marketplaces, and that roads will be built because roads need to be built, and so arrangements will be made between property owners and all that rest. I get that. I have a hard time seeing how we get from here to their idea. And then I also see people who will never say they're communists. They will say they're democratic socialists. And they want kids to be able to read and write and do arithmetic. They want them to be able to be healthy. They want people to have their homes. And they want their pursuit of happiness too. They just believe that social engineering and governmental engineering, some sort of elite who comes together and makes decisions on behalf of people who are not as educated in those areas as they are, to do it. And you're saying that's not just wrong, that's immoral.
That's immoral, yes, that's what I'm saying. And to them...
Is their goal immoral?
No, absolutely not, but it's the means. So, who doesn't want an educated populace? Who doesn't want our children to be able to read and write and
I
learn
want them back in the mines working.
Right. Well, you can, but whether you argue for that or if you argue for them going to school, do it in the marketplace of ideas. Put your money to it. But don't force your neighbor. You can try to convince him, and if you're good at it, you may. But don't force him to pay for it.
Versus wrong.
Yes.
I see it as a contest between values. That I think you and I are those who value liberty over coercion. And I see the world in that spectrum.
Yep.
That's what I see. I wake up in the morning and I see some idiot saying, we're going to outlaw plastic straws. And I go, what? And we can have an argument about that, but convince me not to use one. Don't tell me I can't. Then there are a group of people who see the world, wake up, rub their eyes and see the world of people who are being oppressed and people who are the oppressors. And therefore, their goal is to even that end, to take those of us who are privileged, and I'm very privileged. I was born to parents who gave a damn and taught me to read and write and do the other things and have these values. Some people don't have those parents. Some people don't have the advantage of parents who have a little bit of money to have a stable home, and it's their job to right that wrong, to help those people who have been victimized. What's wrong with that viewpoint?
There is nothing wrong with wanting to do that. What's wrong is using government, using your neighbor's money, using regulation to force your ideas upon other people. The American people is a very benevolent people, and the less we have to pay in taxes and the less subject we are to regulation, the more benevolent we are. You can go back again. There is a myth in this country that people didn't know how to read and write before public education. But the American people, before public education got off the ground, they were very concerned about teaching their kids to read and write. And you had the one house school movement going on. And there are studies that have shown that Americans were probably more literate back in the 19th century than what they are today. So, there are so many ways to do this.
We also had government schools back then, too.
This was before government schools. Government schools started in the second half of the 19th century. There may have been individual communities that had government schools,
right.
But people were not forced to go.
It wasn't run by the federal government,
exactly.
It wasn't run by the state government.
Yeah.
Localities might get together.
And the local governments was normally neighbors, members of the community got together and started a school because they wanted a school. Now, if you didn't want to participate...
In the same way that today we have homeschoolers who get together and make co-ops.
We're kind of reinventing the wheel again.
All right, I tell you what, let's switch to, we've been going around on education. Let's grab something else.
Sure.
How about the environment?
Yeah.
That, you crappy libertarians, all you want is your own stuff.
Exactly.
You're selfish, and you don't care about the air that somebody else breathes. But when you're destroying the environment, cutting down the trees on your property, the guy downstream is going to get washed out because of those externalities. You're going to pollute the air. You're going to spray pesticides, and his animals are going to die. So, what's right or wrong about environmentalism?
Well, there is a lot, but let's take so number one. We can contest how bad it is. There are a lot of research on both sides about how serious climate change is, and so on and so forth.
Let's not even touch climate change.
Okay, let's skip climate change.
You've got a factory and you dump your crap into the stream, and then the guy down there is planning on using that water.
So, according to both have your property rights. You were there first with your farm or pasture or whatever, and here comes the factory. And put in and starts polluting the river, and your cattle dies because they drink polluted water or something. As long as you have as long as you can prove that your cattle died from the runoff from the factory, you have a perfectly valid case under a system of capitalism where protection of individual rights, of which property rights is fundamental. You take him to court, and you will most likely win.
Let me circuit that, which is true libertarians, really hard capitalists. They say we don't need the regulatory state because we have a judicial state. We have a civil laws.
Exactly.
And that if you do something and the externalities of your activities hit me, I have the ability to go to court and get you to stop doing it or be compensated for it. And that alone is enough to do it. I don't think many Americans would agree with you on that. I don't think they can see that in action. They can see it with class action lawsuits, they can see it with other things, but most Americans are thrilled that the EPA exists and Clean Water Act exists and Clean Air Act exists, and that we have regulations on our cars, because I don't know which car owner I'm going to sue. And so I think it's a good thing that Colorado has air quality standards for our automobiles. How would capitalism handle Colorado's air quality?
Capitalism would handle air quality through the marketplace, through different pressure groups. I think it's hard to see today and to fathom what that environment would look like. But as a producer of something, whether it be cars or some other product, in a capitalist system, my biggest asset is my reputation. And we see it today. where pressure groups or activists get together and they target a certain company for whatever reason, bad, good or bad. Those companies are normally pretty receptive to what's happening. And over time in such an environment, you will get clean air much quicker than what you do with the Clean Air Act, what you do with the EPA, etc. Now, if you think about it, let's broaden the scope just a little bit. Where do you have the worst environmental problems in the world?
In collectivist totalitarian governments.
In collectivist totalitarian countries. And why is that?
Because
they don't have well-defined property rights. They have government decrees that are, whether it's 5-year plans or something, meet your quota. Environment is not that important. They don't have the entrepreneurial spirit that you get from a free capitalist society. And back to the benevolence that we talked about before. In a free society, if there is a problem, let's say with clean water, clean air, you will have money pouring into those areas. You will have free people thinking, exercising their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in trying to solve this problem.
To your point,
and just to finish, as you can see, and as we mentioned, the freer the capitalist society, more capitalist societies, they are the ones with the cleanest air. They are the ones with the cleanest environment. And I'm just saying that under a capitalist system where progress would be a lot faster, these problems that we today hand over to the EPA and others to solve, they would be solved in the free marketplace.
I think it's called the Public Education Research Center, PERC, does great environmental work. And they are environmentalists, and they show that privately owned land is always better maintained, better kept than all the governmental lands. Let's just push this. Let's now go into climate change. This is a thought experiment. Let's assume we are suffering from man-made climate change because of greenhouse gases. Let's not argue if that's overstated or not. Let's, for the sake of argument, it's happening.
I'm with you. Yeah.
How in the world do we get a pressure group to sue China or to sue to get rid of coal-fired power plants? I mean, how does your complete capitalistic world deal with it?
Yeah, I don't think we can do much about China in the short term. But number one, when it comes to climate change, number one, yeah, we can agree that it is happening. The next question to ask, though, how bad is it? Because
let's assume that it's bad. Just assume
let's assume that it's bad. Okay, then you can ask yourself, okay, what kind of system would be best in addressing that? Is it that collectivist system that has polluted the world, including China, and continues to pollute the world? Or is it a free society where people are allowed to experiment, to come up with new ideas, to solve these problems?
You're telling me in my own backyard, in my suburban house,
yes,
if I want to put up a coal-generating plant to power my house, you're down with that?
Probably not. It depends on if you're an HOA. The HOA probably has rules against it. If you're not an HOA, you will...
The only thing that would stop me is the government.
Well, so let's say, for the sake of discussion, that you put up a cute little power plant there that you feed your coal into.
Nasty coal.
Nasty coal,
and
exactly.
dung.
And then your neighbor next door is saying, you know what? What John is doing here is really creating a miserable life for me. So again, back to the example we had before.
But what if it's not my neighbor next door? My neighbor next door doesn't care, he's miles down the road, I'm on a farm or whatever. But it's provable that my power plant is contributing to climate change. That I have dirty coal plant, and that's and I got it.
Well, so
how do you get me to have a cleaner power plant?
Well,
or is that even a goal?
Well, it depends. It may be my goal, it may be somebody else's goal. If it is their goal, again, put pressure on you, and start create an organization that wants to convince people like you with your coal plants in your backyard to change to something better. But if you cannot objectively prove that you're doing harm to someone else somewhere, because your soot particles are spreading around, but it's up to the people who claim that you are doing harm to prove it. That is a fundamental.
It sounds like that would get tied up for a long time. Do you see any governmental regulations that you see are good?
I have yet to come across a good regulation. I mean, good regulation in the sense that it may be doing some good, but at the cost of forcing someone else to do something that is violating their individual rights.
FDA has a regulation that you put the ingredients of your package, of what you're selling, on your package. I like that.
I like it too.
I like that too.
I look for minimum sugar. I look for no high fructose corn syrup and stuff like that all the time. Yeah, I love it.
Is that a good regulation?
No. But in the free marketplace, companies, if that is a demand from the consumer, companies will compete in coming out with the best labeling that gives you the best information over time. Over time.
And that's the important part. I would go so far as to say, yeah, you're right about that, but then you're going to have bad actors. And we need to plan on bad actors. We're going to have people who say 100%, alfalfa sprouts, and there's none in there because people like us will go, oh, good, we can buy it. And over time, you'll end up having private organizations that certify these things. I look at
the alfalfa certifiers.
Right. Well, it's like a UL listing. Underwriters Laboratory certifies different electronic products and electrical outlets and things. They go,
it's a good, not perfect example.
Right.
But,
right. In financiers, Moody's and others that rate bonds, and it's not the government. So there will be those things. I think you're going to have a hard time convincing folks that's going to happen faster than having the FDA say, no, here, you guys have to put your ingredients on your package.
I'm not sure I agree with you, because if you take the FDA as an example, there's a lot of movement going on and a lot of pressure on the FDA to speed up the process of approving new drugs, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in general, while people might default to thinking that we have to have an FDA, a USDA, et cetera, I'm not sure that they are that happy with the results.
All right. Last one on this.
Okay.
I like to fly on airplanes. It's really good. I'm sure glad we have an air traffic control system that keeps us safe.
Absolutely.
I'm glad we have a transportation safety board that investigates when planes go down. It seems like they've done a really good job given how safe modern commercial flight is. It's the safest way to travel, even though you're putting people in the sky, which is just unnatural as hell. We go through and we have these laws that say, or regulations that you can't bring your bomb on the plane, you can't bring your machine gun on the plane. Why aren't those good? Why is it that level of safety regulation
Why can't you leave that to the airlines? Do you think the airlines without the FAA, right?
FAA.
Yeah, would like you to carry on your machine gun, or maybe there would be special flights for people who want to carry their machine gun on the flight? I don't know. I don't know what a free marketplace would look, what kind of products would be offered. But you're also talking about a regulatory agency here, again, that is violating the rights of not only individuals, but of airlines and air traffic control. They're already in other countries, we are unfortunately in the U.S. way behind many parts of the rest of the world, in that they have air traffic control systems that are managed by private entities. So there's no question about the fact
those are
that
contracted out services. And I understand the difference. At RTD, the Transportation Transit Agency, we would contract out service. And I would like to contract out all of it instead of running it inside. So, but it's still a governmental system. We specify it. Other countries, they have contracts to run airports. The airports are not owned by the government, they're owned privately. And air traffic control is contracted out to services. A lot of countries have contracted post offices, and their postal services are contracted out. But those are still governmental services. It's just a much more effective and efficient way to do the government.
It's effective, more efficient when it's contracted out.
But is it still immoral? Is it still wrong?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Really?
Yes. So this is something that in the long run, the government should divest itself of, both financially and regulatory. I mean, if you look at it today, why on earth do we need a U.S. post office? FedEx and UPS has proved in practice that, there is
because there is a guy who lives on the top of a mountain that it is not profitable to send up the UPS truck, but the government says he deserves communication services.
Yes,
too.
and who is the government to say that he deserves communication services? He lives on a mountaintop with beautiful views. There are pros and cons he has with doing that. One of them is that he's away from the post office or from deliveries, so he has to drive down the mountain to pick up his packages or mail or something. But there is no reason for the government to run this and in the process violating yours and my individual rights by running a deficit that we pay for by our income taxes.
You and I have cell phones. I assume you have a cell phone.
I do have a cell phone.
And we have this incredible services, and they use different bands of frequencies to do this.
Yes.
If we didn't have a government, who would say, wouldn't we have systems where everybody's using everybody else's frequencies, and that whichever company could afford the biggest, baddest radio wave would just knock everybody else off, and we wouldn't know that this band of frequencies for cell phones, and this band of frequencies for satellites, and this band of frequencies for television, and this band of frequencies for radio? Do you think all that would work out itself in the marketplace?
I think it would. There is one little component here, and that is that in the defense of our country, the military will need some bandwidth, right? So there I would say that the government would be a consumer of bandwidth, of some bandwidth, whatever those are. But for the rest of it, yes, there would be a marketplace for bandwidths. And, we've seen in the past how...
But who holds the property rights for those bandwidths?
So here again, there is a government role, just like it is for a government, there is a role for them to keep property records, so that in the event, you need to sell or you buy and things like that. That is a valid form of government. And the same thing would be for airwaves, that there would be a register of who owns what airwave, and then if you sell it to someone...
We kind of have that now, that companies buy rights for airwaves.
Yeah, but they buy it or lease it from the government for a period of time, right? It's not an outright property ownership. Now there could be lease of airwaves. Maybe a company buys up airwaves and lease it out to consumer.
Final question. Which part of the globe, which country is, from your viewpoint, right, not wrong? Which one is the best out of all the lousy systems we have? Where can you point to and say they are doing a better job than we are?
I'm afraid that I don't know of one. I still think the United States of America is the last and best hope for freedom and for capitalism, and that's why I am here. That is why I'm trying to do my part to the fight to right the ship and bring us back to those principles that started this country in the Declaration of Independence.
So your goal, I think, when we talk about those different policies, we're putting the cart before the horse, because before you can get to that, you need to convince people that individuals are sovereign, that individuals have property rights, that individuals have speech rights, that individuals have all the rights that a nation has, and then build from there to go, wait a second, when government does something, they can't until they steal something from somebody else.
Yeah, and I think this is an iterative process. I don't necessarily know that something in practice comes before something else. I think this has to be an interactive process that moves along, and you do your part, and all the other freedom and liberty related organizations, and even organizations that are tangentially supportive of us, are helping out, moving us slowly in the right direction. It's messy, it will continue to be messy, and this country has always, on some level, been messy. So don't expect a straight line here, but as long as we have a fighting chance.
Since government's right is there to protect our life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. I hate to do this one to you, I just thought of it. So does that mean that the government has a responsibility to protect our lives? What about the unborn?
Oh, that is a huge topic. And how much time do we have? Maybe I should come back and we can discuss.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you my quick answer. It is a beautifully arguable point. If you believe that fetus is a life, then it's government's job to protect it. If you believe that it is not a life, then it's government's job to protect the woman's liberty to choose. And it is an intractable ideological fight, depending on where you put the word life.
Okay, so I think there is a solution. I have a Substack, andersingemarson.substack.com. If you go there and you search for abortion, you'll find a couple of articles that lay out my thoughts on the subject.
Sounds good. Anders, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll find out if you're right or wrong.
Exactly.
And you think freedom.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.